speaking of football, the NFLPA report cards are out. The Jaguars in the past have not done very well in some of these areas, Mia.
Yeah, so I posted this to our 1010XL channels. I actually misspoke on Twitter, but then I reposted it. Last year, in 2023, the Jaguars, I'm going to go right down the line of the 8 categories they had last year. The Jaguars were 29th, tied for last in treatment of families. Now, that sounds like very wait, treatment of families? What are they, hurting? No, they're not hurting them. This is in regards to having a family room, having daycare services provided, that sort of thing. So the Jaguars were tied for last. They were 22nd in food service and nutrition, 29th in the weight room, 17th in strength coaches, 27th in the training room, 9th in training staff. They're 1A. And then 28th in the locker room and 15th in team travel.
So not very good in most of those categories.
Nope, but how far we've come, Lauren, because now in 11 categories this year, the Jaguars rank in the top 10 in 6 of them. Round of applause, Dylan Denmark.
Yeah, that's huge.
Let's go through them. Treatment of families. Yes, I know this was still a hot button topic on social media. They're still 24th. Still a D-, and that's because the Jaguars are one of 12 teams in the NFL that do not have a family room during games. They also are now providing daycare services.
The new stadium probably will include that, would be my guess, based off of all of this data.
Yeah,
the Stadium of the Future renovation will include a family area.
It'll be interesting to see because I don't know. I haven't paid that close attention to that in particular. But this is a quote, again, from this survey that the NFLPA conducts with all of its players. Even though the Jaguars began to offer daycare on game day this past year, some players report that it is, quote, unreliable and isn't worth bringing their kids to. They are hopeful that it will be improved this upcoming year. So that's the good news.
Well, the Jaguars have always been a young team, right?
Yeah.
Normally, over the past 10 years or so, they've been, if not the youngest, one of the youngest teams. So I would imagine that means that there weren't as many players with families, with kids, as there probably are now. And so they probably have needed to shift a little bit. But of course, the Miller Electric Center, I think in its own entity, or as its own entity, changed a lot of these ratings.
Yes, and so let's go through them. The food and cafeteria, what did I say it was last year? Last year, the food was a D, tied for 22nd, up to 14th, B-. Nutritionist, dietitian was broken into a additional category this year. The Jaguars ranked 15th. Here's some of the good stuff. It's coming. Locker room, A-, 6th in the National Football League. Training room, A-, 3rd in the National Football League. Training staff, B+, 8th in the National Football League. Weight room, A, 4th in the National Football League. Strength coaches, a B+, that was 21st. I think some of that was just other teams perhaps gave their strength staff a higher ranking because that's about comparable to where the Jags were last year. And finally, team travel, a B, which was 5th in the National Football League.
So they've improved across the board. And
those categories I listed before I get to the final two, those I wanted to put together because those are the ones that I believe are a direct byproduct of having the Miller Electric Center.
Right. That is been the crucial area where they needed to improve, was having a football dedicated space. Look, the flex field at Daly's Place, when we first started to talk about the idea of it, was, oh, wow, that's exciting. They'll have an indoor facility so they can get out of the heat, or if there is a thunderstorm, they don't have to skip practice, right? All those different factors. But the flex field isn't the most efficient place, right? And so the Miller Electric Center created not just the outdoor practice field, but now also the indoor practice field as well, and its own office space and its own weight room. Like it's obviously state of the art.
And the one thing that I know it's going to hurt to say, but you got to tip your cap to Urban Meyer.
Yep.
Urban Meyer was the one who put that PowerPoint up on the screen, and it revealed, in comparison to the rest of the National Football League in terms of square area in training space, the Jaguars were light years ahead of the rest of the league. Like literally, the Jags had this much on the bar graph, and the Cowboys are off the page, and the Rams
light
are
years behind.
Yes, exactly. The Rams are off the page.
Yeah, and the Miller Electric Center. I know it's easy when we talk about hundreds of millions of dollars, people not to be able to relate to that, but it only costs $120 million. Now that we know the stadium renovation, not even a new stadium, is going to cost $1.4 billion. $120 million for that facility seems like
it's also
such a great use of money.
And it's also building offices. I know that this doesn't matter to fans. Fans just want to see wins on the field, and I respect that. But trust me when I say some of the office space that was having to be used in the stadium,
right,
and that is still being used in the stadium. And certainly they've refurbished it a little bit, but like, I'll be 100 with y'all. We were having to work out of essentially like this little concrete like cellar of a extra auxiliary locker room as the media workspace. Like we would just stare at cinder block walls, and obviously the reports about the rats and the concession stands are out there. So I'll also put that in there too, which is part of why we're getting a new stadium here in Jacksonville. And so just imagine, like, you know, I mean, as much as we talked about it as being a fan, imagine going to work every morning and you see a rat run by.
Oh, yeah. No,
not great.
I've talked to people that work in the stadium, and they 100% saw said rats and then said, I'm not coming back to work in the building. I'll work remotely until the rat issue is taken care of. Like it's funny when it comes to the Panthers and the hockey team that just won, right? The Stanley Cup. It's not funny when you're talking about an actual day in, day out work environment. Yeah. Imagine you having to go to work and having rats running around. Like that is not probably the one thing or anything that anyone wanted to do.
So the NFLPA's report card system this year added 2 categories that the Jaguars scored pretty darn high in. And that was a grade for the head coach and a grade for the owner. For the head coach, Doug Pederson, the Jaguars players gave him an A-, which ranked 19th in the league, which says to me that there's a lot of, you know, players hyping up their head coach.
A- is 19th in the league?
So I think that's a lot of, you know, and
that's a strange curve.
I can read kind of the breakdown here momentarily. And the Jaguars gave Shad Khan an A rating, which was 3rd best in the National Football League. And you can go on NFLPA.com and you can look at these report cards, folks. There are some teams that their players gave their owner an F.
I'm sure, because there are some owners that have obviously more money than other owners. And that is one thing that no one can ever say poorly about Shad Khan, is that he didn't spend enough while he was the owner. And I'm sure his family will be the owners for many, many years to come. But the fact that we gave the stat 2 weeks ago, over $1 billion of his own money by the time the stadium renovation is completed into this city and the stadium and all that stuff, in addition to philanthropy. I mean, that is something that, yes, we should be all super thankful for. Shad, by the way, you weren't here when the stadium renovation
I was actually at dinner with my cousin and my former boss of Freehold Recreation and Parks and Rec and Camp, and all of a sudden I saw like the phone buzzing, and it was funny because Sue looked at me and she's like, "Oh, they just got the stadium deal done, didn't they?" And I was like, "Yep." And I was like trying to be very polite. We're out at dinner, and yeah, so it was expected, obviously, but still very exciting nonetheless.
Yes, absolutely, and lots to be excited about here in Jacksonville, including the stadium renovation that will be, we assume, completed, or we've been told completed, in just 4 years. All right, when we come back.
Just since I alluded to it, the breakdown as to why Doug Pederson, A-, but that was 19th. 80% of the players surveyed feel that head coach Doug Pederson is efficient with their time, which was 24th overall. And the players feel that Doug Pederson is somewhat willing to listen to the locker room, which was 22nd overall. But then I guess there were some other metrics that factor into it. Those are the only 2 that they listed as the highlights of it. But he got an A-. So
who were the best coaches? Do you have it?
Yes, let me pull that up. So if we go
I would assume Mike Tomlin is.
If we go under head coach,
I would assume Andy Reid is near the top.
Hey, Jonathan Gannon got an A- as well. So shout out to him. Let's see. McDermott got an A. Well, that one would be from the previous regime. So that's weird. The Panthers got an A-. Zach Taylor got an A.
Okay.
Mike McCarthy got an A. Sean Payton got an A-. No shock. Dan Campbell got an A+.
Okay.
Was that Joe Coward doing that rating? D'Amico Ryan's an A-. Shane Steichen an A-. Doug Pederson an A-. Andy Reid an A+.
Sure.
Sean McVay an A. Mike McDaniel an A. Kevin O'Connell an A+.
So here's no players are going to rate their head coach poorly, I would imagine, because they don't want that getting back to them, and then they're going to have to run extra sprints in stadiums.
Yeah, outside of what's his name? Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith got a C+.
Well,
that was and hold on. Again, I don't know if this is for Josh McDaniels. I'm assuming it is, but the Raiders gave their coach a D. So I'm assuming that was Josh McDaniels.
Yeah, anytime
not
it's
Antonio
like that,
Pierce.
I'm going to guess that, that's when you're going to see a new coach.
Washington also was a C, which is why you saw a coaching change.
Exactly.